right, can we call this meeting of the Millburn School District 24 Board of Education regular meeting on February 28th to order. Roll call, please.
Ms. Boss?
Present.
Mr. Coleman?
Present.
Mr. Gray? Mr. Lorenzen?
Present.
Mr. Murphy?
Here.
Mr. Pederini?
Present.
Ms. Roberts?
Here.
Welcome everyone. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any public comments?
No.
We did have one by email, which I think she wants us to read out. My name is Anne Marie Mayer, and I teach gifted education at the elementary building. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Lind and the rest of the administration for their sensitivity with the transition to mask optional. The communication to staff and community was thorough and appreciated. There were many emotions concerning mask optional, both for and against. Staff and students felt acknowledged that they have a choice, and there was no judgment. The admin team worked hard to plan for each homeroom to have RP circle time and discuss the change. It was well prepared and allowed for all to communicate how they feel, including the adults. I know several parents that responded with their appreciation for how it was handled and the respect that was given to all. During this difficult time, there have been opportunities to lift the spirits of both the teachers and the students. There are weekly themes for all, many challenges for staff, activities for self-care, an excellent PD opportunity, the last PD day, and this week is Read Across America. All are excited to participate in the themes and to have an additional opportunity to read. A special kudos needs to go to Lori Cipolla, who coordinates the Millburn Student Council. This provides an opportunity for the upper elementary students for leadership roles and purpose. They have created positive affirmative posters, seasonal, and hung them in the school. They did a sock collection, holiday cards for seniors, a food drive for local pantries, made videos that students can relate to reinforce PBIS expectations, and currently are collecting pop tabs for the Ronald McDonald House. In spite of what was going on with COVID and masks, Millburn stepped up and made it a great place to be. Thank you. Does anyone have any additional non-action items? Presentations for our audit.
Okay, Kathy is here with our audit presentation today. And Kathy, you just tell me when you need to.
Yeah.
Need me to change it, and I'll do my best.
Sure. If you
keep up.
In my outline, I do have a few page numbers noted, but I didn't do all of them, so I'll just have to try to follow you. All right, good evening. I am Kathy Naughton from Dieter Casella and Company. Very happy to be here tonight to present the audit results. Apologize for the technical difficulties from a couple of weeks ago. I tried for a very long time to connect. I practiced during the day and for whatever reason just wasn't able to get on. So thought it was easier and less stressful for me to show up in person tonight. So anyway, I wanted to just start out by saying that the audit went really well, as usual. Steve and Carly and Bonnie and the rest of the staff are extremely organized, very responsive to whatever requests that we have. As part of the audit, we evaluated the district's internal controls over financial reporting, and we tested them. All of those controls appear to be working, designed appropriately and working. As part of the audit, we also occasionally make recommendations. Management makes an effort to implement those recommendations. Never had an issue with that. Another point that I would like to make is that as part of an audit, generally if there are items to be reported to the board, management and the board, that are significant enough in nature to be described as reportable, they appear on a management letter. And I wanted to just mention that in the current year, the current audit, there was nothing reportable, nothing significant, so that's really a positive. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about the audit report. Dr. Lind is going to try to follow along with me, but yep, he's on the right page. I think he's done this before. So, all right, so the most important part, I think, for all of you is the opinion, the audit opinion. So the first part of the audit report is going to have our opinion letter. This opinion is an unmodified opinion. In other words, it's a clean opinion. And basically what it says is that the financial statements present fairly, meaning they are free from material misstatement. There's also a section describing our evaluation over the internal controls. We talk about that we've looked at whether those controls are compliant with laws and regulations and grant agreements. We test those items as part of the audit, but we do not provide an opinion on that. All right, I'm going to read the rest of the report from top to bottom. Just kidding, it's like probably 80, 90 pages long, but really I want to just give you a little bit of an overview as to what's in this document. It's too comprehensive to really go through a lot of stuff in detail. For those of you who haven't looked at these types of reports before, just kind of want to give you just again an overview of what you're seeing, what this is all about. The first section is the management's discussion and analysis. So it's a couple of pages down from this. There should be one or two more letters. Again, I apologize for not having the page number a little bit further. So the section that I'm referring to is the management's discussion and analysis. And basically, this is an overview in fairly common terms, common language, not as necessarily technical and specific as the rest of the audit report. But this really is an opportunity to discuss financial highlights, items of note that should be pointed out, make some comparisons about prior years and things like that. So this would be the executive summary, if you will, of the audit report. So it's a nice snapshot of what's happened with a little bit of detail that you're not necessarily going to find later on in the report. Okay, and if we go down a few more pages, we will see sorry again about the pages. Keep going, you'll see financial statements. There should be a cover page, and then we'll get down to the financial statements. There we go. All right, so the first set of financial statements as part of the report are what we refer to as the government-wide financial statements. These are the first two statements will present the financial information of the district and includes pretty much everything. This would be comparable to a business's GAAP financial statements. So it includes long-term resources, long-term obligations, and basically it captures everything in terms of the district's finances. This includes, again, long-term focus, so it's going to have items on it such as pension liabilities, capital assets, long-term debt, and things like that. So this is the statement of net position. If you scroll down to the very bottom, you'll see that essentially the net position of the district is $1.2 million. It's a positive number. Again, something that we're looking for. So again, this statement just really shows what the district owns, future obligations, and then the net position of what's left over, the residual. And again, measured on a long-term basis. The next statement is the statement of activities. And this statement is actually going to break down by function, so things like instruction, support services, and so on. It's going to break down the revenues and the expenses by function of the district. So you can see the list of expenditures, the charges for services, different, again, types of revenues for those programs, at the bottom of those, that statement, you'll see the general revenues of the district, things like your property taxes and so on. There's a reconciliation of the change in net position for the year, and then the ending net position, which ties to that first financial statement. All right, again, these are long-term based, future economic measurement focus. The next set of statements is what we describe as the fund financial statements. This is more like what the board would see on a regular basis. So these are the operating statements of the district. So these are measured on the accrual basis, but they will not include things like long-term debt, capital assets, pension liabilities, and so on. Again, really straightforward in terms of measuring, here are all the district's assets under the current measurement focus. So assets such as your cash and things like that, your liabilities, current payables, things like that. There are some deferred outflows of resources. Those are going to be property taxes that are not useful yet. So again, we measure those receivables for property taxes that are really designed to be used in the next fiscal year. The bottom half of that statement then really just describes the fund balance for each of the funds. So across the columns here on this report are all of the district's major funds. So the educational fund, operations and maintenance fund, and so on. Okay. The next set is, I'm going to talk about that in a second if you want to just skip past that. Here we go. This is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. Again, on an operating basis, this is going to outline the various sources of revenues by fund, and then the various sources of expenditures by fund. So again, on the current measurement focus, so this is actually what came in and went out in this fiscal year. A reconciliation again at the bottom that ties the fund balances from this statement to the statement, the balance sheet basically that we looked at a few seconds ago. And the next, the page that we skipped a few seconds ago and this page, these are reconciliations. And basically these two pages will guide you in terms of what is different between those two sets of financial statements. So there's a reconciliation between the government-wide and the fund financial statements, and this really just provides specific details on what those differences are. And if you're really into this stuff, those are real fun, exciting pages to look at. I like it because it does explain the difference clearly, so. All right. We can keep going. I think the next thing we're going to talk about, following these financial statements, the basic financial statements, are the notes to the financial statements. So here we're talking, I believe it's like page 19 to 45. These are going to be footnotes that describe the information that's presented on the financial statements. So if you want a little bit more detail on what is presented in the financial statements, there's a note explaining the district's accounting policies. There are notes explaining details about things like the deposits on hand, the long-term debt, the changes in long-term debt, the changes in capital assets, and so on. So basically the notes provide support for and maybe a little bit of narrative about those amounts that appear on the financial statements. And again, I'm not really going to go through too many of these. I think that there was one of the last notes, and it'll probably be somewhere around page 40 something, I would guess. Not necessarily to really jump to it, but if you'll notice as you read through these, there was a new accounting principle in fiscal 21. So that's really the only change from what you would have seen in previous audit reports, and it was because student activity funds were previously required to be reported separately on the financial statements, and now starting in fiscal 21, ISB requires that those student activity funds are captured in the educational fund of the district. So due to the fact that the district management, district board has some kind of oversight and control over those funds, they're now included in the district's funds. there's a set of supplemental information. This is the one of the first schedules of the supplemental information. And this is basically just required disclosures in terms of the district's pension liabilities for TRS, IMRF, and then liabilities related to the OPEB plans that the district has, which would be the THIS, and a district OPEB plan for IMRF retirees. Again, these numbers look a little bit overwhelming. At this point, they're just disclosures here. You can evaluate the trend, but at this point, there's very little, the district has very little control over these liabilities. The required withholdings are, contributed to the plans. Those assets are invested outside of the control of the district. Investment performance varies, so you'll see changes in the district's liabilities, pension liabilities, possibly pension assets, just related to those kinds of fluctuations. A lot of information, really at this point, not a whole lot that the district can do in terms of those liabilities, just required to disclose those figures that are measured by the actuaries for those plans. In addition to that, and again, I don't have the page numbers, but following these handful of schedules, the district's budget to actual schedules are listed. And what's nice about that is it really does provide a little bit more detail. Here we go. Almost line item by line item for all of those major funds, the district's major funds. So you can look at the original budget amount, the final budget amount if the budget was amended, and then the actual amounts for comparison purposes. Required to disclose that again, just for a little bit more transparency. So
on those though, when you're doing that comparison, our budget's a cash budget and the audit is an accrual, so
that is correct.
The numbers won't always match up 100%.
They won't always match up. There are going to be some items that will look a little bit different from the actual budgeted. The actual numbers are going to look a little bit different, and that's a challenge when the district maintains its books on a daily basis using the cash basis, but is required to report on the accrual basis. So not uncommon though, not uncommon at all for a district of this size. So okay. The last thing I wanted to talk about as far as the report is there'll be a new section this year. At the very end, you should see what we're referring to as the federal section. And so this would not have been reported, you're almost there. You're almost there, a little more. There we go, this is the federal section. So due to the federal funding that the district received in fiscal 21, the amount of federal funds was pushed over the threshold for what we call a single audit. So it's a federal audit, basically, an audit of the federal programs run by the district. So that was just an additional component to the audit. Probably haven't had one here in a long time, but again, due to the extra influx, primarily I think it was the summer food program here that pushed the federal funding for the programs in 2021 over the threshold. And really what that entailed was we determined what were the major programs, the major federal programs for the district, and then we had to design some tests to perform, and we then provided information on whether the district was in compliance with the requirements for the federal funding. Had no findings this year, no instances of non-compliance noted, so that's really excellent, especially when it's not something we do every year. A lot of times if a district hasn't had a federal audit for a while, the compliance requirements are really strict, so it's something that, again, that's kind of a kudos to the finance team, that they had the documentation in order, the compliance was being followed, even without that experience of having this federal audit for the last several years at least. So again, really happy to note no instances of non-compliance there, so that's an achievement. All right, and that's basically that's a summary of the federal programs that we tested, that last document. And again, lots of fun information, stuff that I really enjoy, and and maybe some of you will find that interesting as well, but you can look at the details of those programs. As far as the audit report, that was as much as I wanted to give. I know it's a lot. I know it can be overwhelming, and you know, you're not maybe processing what I'm saying, but maybe you'll look back and be able to look at that and say, oh, I get it now. So I did want to mention one other thing. Part of the reporting process is the annual financial report for the State Board of Education, and one of the measures that is calculated and reported in that financial report is the financial profile score for the district. That is a score that breaks down by category some of the financial strength measures. So, and there are ratios related to things like fund balance, revenues compared to expenses, cash on hand, long-term debt requirements. And so a measure is actually calculated with all these ratios. And I was really pleased to see that, you know, the district has moved up from a level, you know, the measure is like on a scale of 1 to 4. In 2018, the district was at a 3.0, which is actually in the warning category. 2020, I think it moved up to the second highest category, which is review. This year for fiscal 21, I say this year because that's the year I audited, but really it's last year for you guys. The district received a score of 3.55, which is recognition. So that's the highest designation. So I think that really kind of demonstrates that the district has made progress towards, you know, working towards its goal to, you know, improve the financial position in that. So, and I know that I'm not sure exactly how long ago the fund balance policy was either revised or implemented, and I know that, again, this shows that the district's progressing in its goal to, you know, that fund balance policy that you guys have worked on. So good progress there. Then the last thing, really, I just basically give you a heads up in terms of what's new in auditing and financial reporting standards. For fiscal 22, the new standard that's gotten a lot of attention, it's kind of been postponed, I think, due to the pandemic, but there's a new leasing standard, and it basically what it's going to do is require entities to report significant leased assets as if they were owned in financial statements. So we'll have guidance, and we'll work with the finance team to help in terms of what the district has to do to implement the standard and increase the reporting on that stuff for next year. So, okay, that's it. Any questions? Fascinating, right? So exciting. Okay, good. Anything else? Okay, good.
Thank you.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear we're looking better. Action items, reading of board policies. Do we have anything we want to pull out of there?
Jason, are we doing the budget projection now or later?
Oh, sorry.
We can do that.
So excited. So excited to be done with budget.
Yeah, not quite. And this is one of those that's kind of always a work in progress. Even as I walked in, I thought of a couple more things I need to go back and look at. But this will give you at least an idea of where we're headed. Go ahead and go to the page that has works on it. There you go. In this projection, the CPI for FY23's budget is 1.4%. For FY24 is 5%. We don't know what it's going to be for FY25, 26, or 27. So I plugged in 2.5%. That's a little above the 5-year average, but it's closer to, anyway, that's a reasonable number. I do think possibly within the next couple years, if inflation ramps up like they're talking that it could, then we could have another year of 5%. But I didn't want to plug that in just yet. The fund balance that's shown on the projection is showing a fund balance of 2.9 million, and that was based on a cash basis, because at the time that these numbers were plugged in, we didn't have the annual financial report yet. So it's actually 2.6 million is the fund balance for FY21. And then FY22 to 27, I did it based on an accrual basis, as far as salaries and benefits, which is the majority of what gets done as accrual. Just realize that FY21 and 22 are going to show a lot less transportation expenses, salaries and benefits, fuel, etc., because of the fact that we have fewer field trips and or sports runs. Basically, previously they were just bringing kids to school, taking them home. FY22 includes about 4.8 FTEs of open positions. I know we had one teacher on leave this year. We have another one that's only working 1 day a week instead of 4 days a week. We have a couple open positions and then some other miscellaneous. So that equates to 4.8. So when I did the projection for FY22, I didn't include those positions, so then we added them back in for FY23. We also in FY21 saw a decrease in students in private placement and or students enrolled in CEDAL programs. We had a couple families that moved away. I think we had one that pulled their child out of school and homeschooled them. And each of those children is about $50,000 to $100,000 per student. So that also would show why we spent less in FY21. And then we also had a reduction in stipend positions, club sports, etc. We did have a few, but not nearly as many as we have this year. And I'm assuming that probably next year we may be, back up to where we were pre-pandemic. Bad news, Carly and I attended the health insurance cooperative meeting last week. At this point, we're looking at probably a 17.5% increase for the PPO plan, which, to give you a number, is just a little over, it's over 300,000. I'm estimating that we're going to make some plan changes. So in the projection, I put in a projection of 14% increase. So that's just a little over 300,000. For the HMO, which we don't have a huge number of people on that plan, that increase is 8.4% without plan changes. I know the co-op has requested some pricing on a couple minor changes there. Dental insurance is about where we anticipated it would be at a 2.5% increase. No increase in vision, no increase in life, and I'm waiting on some information from on the long-term disability rates. They're actually auditing our census right now, so once I get that, then, but it's a fairly small number. The big chunk of money is that health insurance. That's 2 point something million. So any increases in that is significant. Also assumed a return to paid, free, and reduced lunches, which then reduces our federal revenue for lunches. And then I had to add back in the, I think I went back to 2019-20 to kind of look what a more normal year was, and even that year didn't include from spring break forward. And then FY21, 22, and 23 all include increased federal funding and expenses, because we still have some of the ESSER's money remaining, and we have some of the ESSER 2 money, and then we have ESSER 3 money that we've just started to spend. Just to kind of give you an idea, the biggest source of our revenue, 63% is property taxes. And evidence-based funding, which is the state funding, is 20%. Local revenue is about 9%. This is for all of the funds listed: education, operations and maintenance, transportation, IMRF, social security, working cash, and tort. And then you can see on the right kind of where our revenue was each year for those funds. So there was a fairly significant jump between FY20 and FY21.
Is that because of the grant?
And I think part of that had to, no, that wouldn't be the, yes, part of that would be the grant. Part of it would include if I shifted money from one levy to another, it wasn't one of these funds.
The ESSER funds, or how do we call it?
It's like emergency,
Yeah,
it's federal dollars.
and that's when we were doing, the like bonus for teachers that were doing the distance learning on those days. With that being changed, do we have an idea of how to spend those funds? Or is that
Well,
something-
pretty much, most of the funds I do have built in there, an upgrade to the oldest section of the building at the elementary building to get it computerized so that we can actually control a lot more as far as air coming into the building and temperatures, et cetera. Because the very oldest section, the 60s and 70s sections, have minimal control over what we can do with heating and air conditioning. So I think that's about 87,000. And then pretty much the rest of the money, they're telling us we have to use a certain amount on summer school, a certain amount on after-school remediation. There's money that we are told how much we have to spend on enrichment, and there's another category.
We have what, till 2022 to spend it?
I think through 23, 24.
Yeah, we've got
Either-
a while.
Yeah, it's not next year, it's one more year after next year.
But your question, Vanessa, was if we had extra money that we didn't spend on remote learning,
Mm-hmm,
that if there was extra additional funds, where would we put that?
mm-hmm.
There's lots of places.
Yeah,
Lots
I
of
just was
holes.
thinking, since we, as a board, said we wanted to allocate that to supporting teachers, I would just wanna make sure that we didn't kind of change that commitment and make sure we're still supporting in a different way, some of the ways that the pandemic has affected their workload. We can, if you see a need, or, I wouldn't want to shift it automatically into something that's like a structural or,
Right.
Yeah, and with the grants, there'll be plenty of opportunities to look at making amendments, especially with ESSER 3, which is a little bit larger grant. But like I said, there still is a fairly significant amount of that is pretty much allocated, saying, we're gonna give you this money, but here's how you have to spend it.
yeah, we had
With all
some
the-
wiggle room.
Yeah, and it is something that with everything that students and teachers have gone through, there is a need for additional instruction and helping get everybody back up to the same level they were pre-pandemic.
As far as,
As far as instruction, some of the kids who didn't do well
okay,
with being home with just having Zoom for a year, no wait, that wasn't a year, it was from spring break to the end of the year, and then they still had half day that they were Zooming all of last year, so just to kind of help all the students get back up to, but like I said, they do have some that we do have to use on enhancement as well for, or enrichment for students who maybe have done okay but could learn more as well. And then expenditures, just so you can kind of see, once again, the salaries and benefits are 81% of our, of those budgets. So it is, once we start looking at where we could, if we have to, in the future, make reductions, there's a very slim window there of 19% of the budget that you can cut, other than salaries and benefits. The majority of education is focused on on the staff and having the staff available to work with students and help them learn and grow. And then you can just kind of see the expenditure projections there. Now this is the, kind of some of the things I talked about earlier. This is our first, kind of our first run at projecting. And like I said, the 2.9 million should really be about 2.6. And then as I was walking in tonight, I realized that when I was looking at 400 objects, supplies, the majority of teachers with their budgets and things have already put in all their purchase orders for supplies. I do think, and I need to go back and look, like the special ed grant, there may be some other grants that have some supply money built into them that we may use between now and the end of the year, and I need to probably plug that in, and that will reduce the FY22 balance a little bit. But there are some things that, because we were in a pandemic with extracurricular and some of the other things I listed earlier, there were areas where we spent less. And we were relatively lucky that at least that most of last year we were able to pay for all of the PPE type things that we needed from those federal grant dollars. Both the dollars that came from the feds and also the dollars that came from the feds through the county. So basically we're looking at, with this one not starting to go down until 2025. And typically we try to look at the first 2 or 3 years of a 5-year projection, knowing that the further you go out, you know, you're compounding 1 year upon the other. So if you make one false assumption, then that gets magnified each year after that. Anybody have any questions, or do you need help?
I just see that working cash is projected to continually increase.
Right, because there's no expenditures out of working cash. It's basically your emergency fund.
Yep, yep.
But it still is included in part of the,
Right.
the operating
But it's
funds.
indicative that the emergency fund should continue to
Right.
increase.
And I think last year and this year that amount was in the $50,000 to $60,000 range, so it wasn't huge. But when I first came here 11 years ago, we had 2,000 or 3,000 in there, and then when we did the budget, or some point in the spring, they would do a resolution and move that money back into the education fund, and then you started over again. And so I am happy to say that we have built that up so that if there is a true emergency, we have access to those monies to help fill the gap for a year or so. And some of this too can be adjusted by how we do the levy, trying to project a little bit better as far as where we're going in the future. The O&M fund has been one that we've always had a problem with because it only gets property tax dollars and local, basically building rental. Occasionally we'll get some type of a grant or something that we might plug in there, but the majority of it is property tax dollars, and there's a cap on how much we can get. So we're constantly trying to move money from other funds into operations and maintenance because it takes more than what we're allowed to generate to maintain our buildings, as far as heat, electricity, repairs, snow plowing, etc. So if you see where the second set of bars are, where it says operations and maintenance underneath, you can see that for several years in a row there was a deficit. And then it looks like, you know, in the projection that we're hopefully being able to move a little bit further in a positive direction. So ideally, you're gonna wanna see the bars up on top of the line as opposed to below them. Below them means that they're deficit.
Why is tort going down?
Because we had, with property taxpayers, when you get, I think it's more than 2 or 2.5 years worth of cash balance built up in there, then the large taxpayers will hire an attorney and they will appeal to try to get you to pay them money back. So we don't ever want that to get to the point that they're able to do that, because we can always use that money in one of our other funds. And it only affects those taxpayers that actually do the appeal. It doesn't affect all taxpayers. So that's something I learned the hard way by having them come take some of our money away from us. And it's just a matter of kind of watching what your balances are and shifting your levy so that you put the money in the funds that you need it in. And if you were looking at the 10-year of this, we were way below the line 11 years ago. In every fund, I think. Anybody have any more questions?
No, just thanks to you, Carly, and everybody that's contributed to the process, and very encouraging to hear the results of the audit. And just the general position of the district. So thank you. That's a lot of work.
And I don't know if you have some comments, Jason.
No, I think it's great.
Thank you, Dr. Young. All right, now on to action items and our board policies. Do we have anything we want to pull out or anything like that?
I will be honest, I have not looked at them, so I'll have to defer on this one, sorry.
I didn't find anything material.
All right. Do we have a motion?
I move to pass the action items as stated,
Board policies.
board policies as stated.
Second.
Roll call. Well, we can do a yes, no roll call.
You can.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. No opposition, the measure passes. Board policies are approved. 2022-23 school year fees, activity clubs and registrations.
We talked about this at our last board meeting and at the committee meeting, I should say. And we're saying, presenting a flat fee moving forward for at least one more year. We have not raised the fees in at least 10 years, to my knowledge, and we've maintained them nice and steady, which is great. And maybe when we get to those years where the line starts to go under, we may have to raise them again. But for now, we're anticipating another year of flat fees.
We have a motion on the fees.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2022-23 school year school fees.
Second.
Are there any questions? Roll call, please, Brian.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Boss?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Lorenzen?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Federini?
Yes.
The motion passed.
On contract with Consolidated Chicago.
Okay, just as an overview and a reminder, we are looking to do a flooring project this summer in the oldest section of the elementary building to replace some of the flooring that's in pretty rough shape. And in classrooms and in the hallways. And we are leveraging a $50,000 grant from the state, matching grant, so we had to spend at least $100,000 to maximize the 50. But we're well over that, but we have money set aside in our capital projects fund for this, and it is designated for this, so we are using this to maximize our flooring for this project and this summer.
Can I just have a reminder, if this is done, how much of the asbestos flooring remains?
This
Just
is
the second
zero,
floor?
there's zero
That's zero
asbestos in this.
asbestos, this is just the bad.
Yep.
We have,
The asbestos tile is still in good shape, unfortunately. That
But we
asbestos
only
was
have-
good stuff.
yeah, we only have one level. When you go into the elementary building, the stairway that goes directly up to the right,
Right.
that like elevated section is the
just
section that's still
Okay, that's
asbestos.
what I thought,
Yeah,
okay.
it's
So
right
I
up
think
here.
there are the equivalent of about 6 classrooms.
Yep, 6 or 8.
Yeah.
Here,
right there.
this classroom, or one of these is combined, must be the lower view,
Yeah,
but there's 5 classrooms, but it's this amount of space right here.
Yeah, I
And
think
that's
the-
it.
I
That's
think the
left.
one just below your cursor is the one that's the double room upstairs.
This one.
Yeah,
I thought the lower level one was the one that was getting water.
but that's all been taken care of.
That's the one we did.
That's the one we did.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
And the
So-
generator is now hooked up to the sump pump, so,
And we've done, all of this was asbestos over here, and that has been done.
and the stem lab. So basically
The stem lab was asbestos.
from the
here.
main office to the east, with the exception of that elevated section, all the flooring will be new.
Yep. So this will be the only section that's not done. And doing this section with asbestos at the same time as doing all this, I think might be a little bit more than we can chew in one summer. That's a big chunk. And doing the asbestos is a huge pain.
Yeah,
And
the
much more
removal of the
cost.
asbestos is gonna be 2 or 3 times the removal of the vinyl floor tile,
Yeah.
as far as cost, because of all the containment that has to take place.
In my opinion, it's ugly. So now, this is gonna be a mismatched section in between 2 newer sections, but it's in good shape, so it's really hard to do that. Hopefully soon.
And
Maybe
then,
internet.
in all these areas, instead of having the mats that we currently have, we'll have the walk-off carpet like we have in the oldest section of the building, right outside the business office, and also where they come in for Red Apple and where the nurse is. It's a rough carpet that's carpet square, so then down the road, if they get damaged or whatever, we can pull them up and put down new ones. It's a lot less tripping hazards, as well as we've extended so that it's a longer area for them to walk off the water in the snow. Because you always have a problem in a school that, you know, there's just never enough carpet for the kids to walk on to get rid of all that stuff on their shoes. And there's not gonna be any tile areas for them to be walking in. They have to walk across this walk-off carpet. So it should make a much drier, less hazardous, environment when we have rain and snow. Especially when they're coming in from the playgrounds. And both of the areas where they come in from the playgrounds will have the new walk-off carpet. And it actually, over by the east gym, will extend a little bit further than what it shows on that drawing. It's gonna go down to about the middle of the next room.
We have a motion on the contract?
Motion
motion to approve contract with consolidated Chicago for flooring replacement.
Second?
Do we have any other further questions? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Pederini,
Yes.
Ms. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Boss,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Lorenzen,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
the motion passed.
Recommended changes to bus driver salaries.
Okay, we talked, last couple of meetings about changing the bus driver salaries and making some adjustments with our, new plan. I don't know how to describe that, but making some, adjustments as we've been attracting drivers and doing some market adjustments. We had some inconsistencies with drivers and we're trying to balance that out, better to be more fair, so, that has been in your packet and we've talked about that, so if there's no questions, we can take action on that.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the recommended changes of the bus driver salaries effective January 1st, 2022.
I second that motion?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Pederini,
Yes.
Ms. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Boss,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Lorenzen,
Yes.
the motion passed.
Red Apple license.
Okay, every year we have, Red Apple operates their private preschool company that operates and leases space from us in our building at Milburn Elementary School. And they sign a lease every year, giving Milburn, we take a certain percentage of their, revenues as payment for that space.
That's
So
20%.
What's that?
20%.
20%.
Of their gross revenue.
So it's working out well for them as they grow, we get more money and compensation for that. If they don't, if their enrollment is down, they don't have to pay as much. It's a good balance, I think, and it's working out. They keep wanting to come back, so it's also good. We have, teachers and parents who have kids in either early childhood or not who use that program, so it's been working out pretty well. They do a nice job.
Can you explain the current legal liability that we have for housing?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that over the years quite a bit. There's no additional, we have 1,100 kids in the building every day. There's no additional liability having them operate. They have to have their own insurance, carry their own insurance, and their own insurance hits first.
Okay.
And I believe it's a $3 million policy.
$1 million per, no,
Or is it-
not less than $1 million per occurrence and $3 million aggregate.
So they have to carry their insurance first, so anything.
And these amounts are ones that both the insurance cooperative we belong to and our attorney, agreed were adequate.
Okay, so the attorney reviewed it.
Well, the attorney wrote the license agreement.
Okay, good.
Yeah, these are good questions.
Signed on.
And then just as a side thing too, just so you know, when you do a license agreement, they don't have 24/7 access to the premises. And in the case of when they're renting from a school district, they don't have to pay property taxes. When we had, the special school in here, they had a lease with us, which meant that they had 24/7 access to their premises, and then they had to pay a leasehold, property taxes based on the value of the lease. That the county comes up with a number and sends them a tax bill. So by doing a license agreement where you don't have 24/7 access, they're basically just following what's in the license agreement. I do believe we have language in here if the county would ever charge property taxes, leasehold property taxes, that then they would have to pay those as well. But currently, that's not anything that the county requires them to pay.
There's a motion.
I move we approve the Red Apple license agreement.
I'll second.
No other questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lorenzen,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Federini,
Yes.
Ms. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Boss,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
the motion passed.
On to the semi-annual review of closed session minutes. Destruction of audio tapes more than 18 months old. Did anybody have anything on those they thought needed to be saved? Okay. Do we have a motion on this?
I move to approve the semi-annual review of closed session minutes and destruction of audio tapes more than 18 months old.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Approval of the contract for Carly Kraft as business manager, 2022 to 2024.
All right. Well, Carly Kraft is here tonight, and she's in line to replace Steve as business manager next year. And I'd like to give her a contract. It's a 2-year contract, which will align with other administrators in the district, and as far as when their contracts are up. And I would like the board to approve that tonight. And I'm excited about offering her that opportunity and what she's going to do for us. Work very hard, continue to work very hard.
Wait, so you guys can all quit at once and we're screwed?
Seriously.
Possibly.
You wanna change contracts, is that what you're saying? Lock her in for another,
Lock her in for another year or two.
are there any other questions? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Sorry. Ms. Boss,
Most definitely, yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Lorenzen,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Federini,
Yes.
Ms. Roberts,
Yes.
the motion passed.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations, Carly.
Does anyone have anything they'd like to pull out of the consent agenda? Not, we have a motion.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Information and discussion. Policies for review, residents and student discipline.
Okay, we don't have any changes presented yet for those, so those will be on for future agenda items, if that's okay.
Sure. No problem. We have a FOIA request just for your information.
3 of them.
3 of them. There's no guy. Vince Espy and Nathaniel Rich.
Can you explain what the surety bond is again?
It's
I mean,
basically,
in brief.
the surety bond is basically the treasurer's bond.
Okay, thank you.
And then the board also has an errors and omissions policy as well. But it's a whole bunch of paper that we set them electronically.
Any questions? You can probably explain them anyhow, it's not a. Future agenda items, does anyone have anything they'd like to add to that? school year fees, phone system, budget policy, non-certified staff salary review, press policy, and proposed Board of Education meeting dates. Superintendent's report.
Okay. So last week we had Professional Development Day on Tuesday. It was wonderful. Teachers did a great job presenting to each other and learning from the expertise that we have in our buildings, which is tremendous, and trying to utilize that talent. And so that was fun to watch and impressive to see. We had Allie Hearn, who's our consultant for restorative practices, which we are in the process of becoming a restorative practices district and doing that in all aspects of how we operate as a district and relationships with teams and teachers and parents and children. So this is all part of what we're trying to become as a district, and she's been working with us, and she presented some more information as well. We're having our staff do 2-day training on that, on restorative practices and operating those types of groups within classrooms. And we've got 60 staff members trained at this point, and we're trying to get the rest. We have 2 more dates set up where we're trying to get everybody else trained in that so they can use that with kids in their classrooms. Trying to think else. As you saw tonight, as you came in, volleyball was happening. That was the 7th grade volleyball tournament. So 7th and 8th grade volleyball tournaments are this week. They're wrapping up their seasons. And
6th grade too.
8th grade too. Yes. Oh, 6th grade?
6th grade.
6th grade. Oh. Yes, 6th grade. 6th and 7th. I say 7th because we call it the 7th grade team, but 6th graders are on the team too.
6th graders, so I have to brag.
Yes. 6th graders that make the team is impressive. But the 6th and 7th grade boys and 8th grade boys are playing in the tournament, season-ending tournament, and they're doing well. Learned a lot. It's fun to see play, always. That season wraps up this week, and in about 2 weeks or so, track starts. And that's a big season. And golf. Can't forget golf.
Golf, the new sport.
Last year we had a state place winner. So golf. We have a golf team. Pretty good. We had a hole-in-one last year.
Oh.
One of our 8th grade girls, I think she's on the high school team this year. Doing well. So lots of good things happening. The author visit today. As you go out, if you notice, there's pictures of his books on the wall outside in the hallway. He did a great job presenting the kids, talking about hard work and trying to keep trying even though you fail. He failed, 99 times. He was rejected by a publisher, and his 100th time, he got his book picked up, and now he's a very well-known children's author. So he had a good message for the kids today. So that was a good day. Lots of good things happening. I'll talk, and I've shared with the board some of our test scores from last year and how kids are doing at the high school. I'm still waiting for Lakes High School and some other high schools to get some information back, but what our kids do when they leave Milburn is pretty impressive. And so we're continuing even now in this pandemic to prepare kids well for high school, and they're having success as freshmen, and that's a testament. So, good things, lots of good things happening. I appreciate it. Got a great staff.
Thank you. Dr. John?
Okay, and I didn't actually have a written report, but I'll just tell you a couple things to kind of get you up to date. I think in the last meeting, I did make you aware that we had kind of a musty smell in one of the elementary school classrooms where we had a water leak over winter break. We did have an environmental company come in and do we basically moved those students into the media center at the elementary building for about 2 weeks while we cleaned and replaced ceiling tiles and tried to figure out why there was a musty smell in there. I'm not sure, we didn't find any like major thing that said, oh, this is where the problem is. But I did have our environmental company come in and do an air quality test before we move students back in there. And typically when you have that musty kind of a smell, you should be concerned about the possibility of mold or some other kind of airborne thing in the classroom. The mold count at the time they did the sample outside was 300. The mold count inside the classroom was 30, which tells you there's really not an issue with mold in that classroom. So we were able to move them back in Friday, I believe. Last Friday.
Thursday after school, they were in the classroom.
That's right.
Because we had to set up for the book
Thursdays
fair,
when I got the results about 2 o'clock on Thursday.
which is why we're here tonight.
Right.
It's all coming together.
And then phone system, just to give you an update, Dr. Lind and Carly and Tom Olendes and I met with District 117 and CDW today to talk about possible system with District 117. We've met with 3 other companies. We have some test phones coming from one of the cloud-based companies so that we can try them out and see what the quality is. One of the companies I know that we've been talking to is the company that provides the phones for Round Lake. So I want to maybe talk to you to see what you think about your phones. But hopefully we'll get everything firmed up and very soon be able to come to you with a recommendation.
Thank you, Dr.
That's it.
Board, do you have a report? Okay, we are going to go into a closed meeting today for just number 2, collective negotiating matters between public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. So if you're in the audience and you don't want to stick around for all this, we're just going to close when we come back to take no action.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Sure.
Did we have a roll call yet?
No.
No, we do a roll call first.
We do need a roll call, sorry.
Well, I was just wondering, sorry. Ms. Boss?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman? Mr. Gray? Mr. Lorenzen?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Pederini?
Yes.
Ms. Roberts?